Hey all, welcome to part 2 of this presentation. I'm excited to talk about how we can evaluate our presentation material before we actually give the presentation. So what we'll do in here is we'll first talk about how to create a rubric in ChatGPT to evaluate your presentation material, and then we'll go into NotebookLM and showcase how that can actually utilize that rubric to evaluate the material and the presentation material. Theoretically, you can use ChatGPT for everything that you want to do. However, in terms of providing a variety and be able to showcase different AI tools, we'll utilize ChatGPT and then we'll utilize NotebookLM. So let's first talk about how to build that rubric in ChatGPT so that we can be able to provide that rubric to NotebookLM to evaluate all of our material. So breaking down this prompt that I put together, my initial goal was to get help in creating a prompt in ChatGPT, just like in part 1. So I provided the prompt in terms of saying this is the goal that I want to do. It's really to create a rubric to evaluate my presentation material in a classroom before I actually deliver the presentation material. I gave it a set of parameters in terms of what I want to be evaluated, as well as gave it some latitude to provide additional criterion it can evaluate me on. In addition, I provided an idea for what type of point scale I want. So I want it to be out of 3 points. So 3 point in the column would just mean that I put intentional effort and dedication towards it. 1 point would mean that there's minimal to no effort. Thankfully, I'm not grading myself, so I don't have to worry about the points meaning anything, just like in Whose Line Is It Anyways. The last part is my favorite question. What questions do you have for me? And so I provided that, and it went ahead and spit back out questions and thoughts. I always like to have that conversation with ChatGPT because then I can get the best response that I can from it. And so you can see it provided very clear and concise and relevant questions for me. We'll see that it provided an audience type, provided a rubric format preference, additional categories that it's suggesting, as well as tone and detail level. You'll be able to see my responses back. Especially for the first one, I did want to emphasize that I am using AI to evaluate me on my presentation material. All the other stuff went ahead and provided a response. It asked me as well at the end of this by drafting a sample version. I went ahead and said, feel free to. If you don't feel like you need to prompt me, go ahead and start creating a rubric for me. That's perfectly fine. One less step that I have to do. So I went ahead, drafted that prompt. At least I have this prompt whenever I want to use it. And then if we go and scroll down a little bit more further, I can go ahead and see the rubric prompt or the rubric track that it provided. And so first time I went through this and through this rubric, I thought it actually looked pretty good and pretty comprehensive. I'll give you a second to take a look. You'll be able to see the different criterion. And then as we scroll over, you can see that it went through the 3 point scale for each criterion. I was pretty pleased by this, so what I went ahead and did was asked it to go ahead and export into a Word document, and then I realized right afterwards when I said export to a Word document, NotebookLM will not take up any Microsoft Word documents, it will take up PDFs. Instead of me having to go into the Word document and clicking Save As PDF or uploading it onto a Google Drive, I went ahead and just said, hey, look, can you export it onto a PDF? If you want to, you can always use that Word document, save it as a PDF. I just was being a little bit lazier and wanted to do as minimal work, so I just asked it to go ahead and convert it into a PDF instead. So it did that and provided the PDF, as you can see right here. When I tried and tested out that rubric, the one thing that kept popping up was an error, and the error came up that it couldn't evaluate my presentation material. And so my reasoning for why it couldn't, if we go back to the rubric up here, is that a lot of the information is about how I'm presenting as if I'm doing a dry run-through. There are some opportunities in there for it to really think about how to evaluate my presentation material, since I really want to evaluate my PowerPoint presentation as well as any other supplemental information without doing a dry run through. And so because of that, I had to ask it and provide an additional clarification for it to be able to provide that information that I really wanted and that rubric that I wanted. And so if we scroll back down, you can see I asked it some more clarification and asked it to reformat the rubric so that it evaluates just the slides and any supplemental notes. Before we actually just take a look at the rubric, we'll take a look at what it provided in terms of small changes based on the new focus. You can see it reframes certain questions. So if we scroll back up to the actual rubric, you can see that it has the same criterion, but some of the information changed. And so I'll let you be able to take a look at it for the next few seconds. Alright, so now that we have our rubric in here, we'll go ahead and export that as a PDF, and you can see that I did that. Again, for NotebookLM, in order to use sources and upload sources, unfortunately it doesn't take Microsoft products into there, so you'll either have to convert it into a PDF or upload it to a Google Drive, and then from the Google Drive you can go ahead and access whatever materials that you want to. So this takes care of the ChatGPT part, and during this part, all that we did was created a rubric to help us be able to evaluate our presentation material before we go into the classroom. And the presentation material for us in terms of our examples will just be used PowerPoint presentation slides and any other supplementary notes. So let's go ahead and jump into NotebookLM and talk about utilizing that rubric to evaluate our presentation material. So now that we're in NotebookLM, we'll go ahead and upload our information, our slides. So when I started again testing out the rubric, the other thing that I noted was that when I uploaded PDFs of the slides, it didn't take that into consideration that those were PowerPoint presentation material. So instead of using PDF, I just went ahead and converted my slides into Google Slides. So there's two ways of doing that. One is building out your slide deck in Google if you wanted to. The other opportunity is uploading your PowerPoint presentation slides into Google Drive. Once you are in your Google Drive, you can go ahead, double-click on your PowerPoint presentation, and then it should convert it into a Google PowerPoint presentation slide deck. So that's what you see in here. And when I did that and tested it out, it ended up working, was able to provide information from the rubric. I also included notes. So my slide deck is usually pretty concise with minimal text and a lot more pictures. So because of that, and to make it as fair as possible for the students, I tend to provide a handout in addition to whatever I do for the PowerPoint presentation. That way they can really absorb the content. That's just my own personal preference. So I upload my notes that I take, as well as the PowerPoint presentation, and then you can also see a rubric as well. So let's go ahead and break down the prompt that I used to be able to use the rubric to evaluate my PowerPoint presentation as well as my notes. So if we take a look, you'll see that it says, using the rubric attached, please evaluate the presentation material. I really wanted it to evaluate each criterion, be able to provide a rationale for what it did, why did it score the way that it did, provide opportunities for improvement, and things that I'm doing well. I also wanted to do a holistic interpretation and holistic evaluation of my presentation material. And so what I asked it to do is provide a general thought process for opportunities for improvement, what I did well for the general presentation, and what it would recommend changing. And then utilize my favorite question, what questions do you have before providing a response? When we scroll through and take a look at how it scored it, you'll be able to see that it provided for me at least overall, hey look, you scored between a 2 and a 3. There were no 1s in there, which is really great to see. And then it provided an average score for it, so somewhere between 2.3 and 2.5. As we're scrolling through and going down, you'll be able to see each criterion. So for student engagement potential, you see it scored me as a 2. Provided a rationale. The presentation slide deck included at least one slide, which makes me a little bit sad considering I should be doing a better job as an educator. But you'll see that opportunities for improvement are there, and so it provides really concise, detailed information of what I can do. So it's saying, hey, instead of just doing it one time, you should probably think about doing it multiple times. And so it also includes what was done well, which is being intentional about that one slide. I'll go ahead and scroll through at least for each criterion before we move to the overall evaluation of the rubric or of the presentation. Alright, now that you had a chance of taking a look at each of the criterion, we'll now go through and take a look at what it provided from a general thought process for opportunities for improvement. So you'll see that it provided a general approach for improvement. It's summarizing a lot of the content that it provided up above for each of the criterion, which is perfectly fine. It's still a really great place to be able to quickly scroll through, see a general summary of all the recommendations for improvements. The recommendations for changes do connect to the general overall improvements in terms of what it wants me to take a look at. So hopefully this provides some guidance and some direction in terms of how you can utilize a rubric to help evaluate your presentation material beforehand. And that way when you get into the classroom, you can really optimize your learning experience. That is one thing that you can do, and probably the predominant way that I would recommend taking a look and evaluating your material. Two other things that I tend to do just to make sure I'm okay and really highlighting the high level concepts. I usually take a look at the FAQ as well as the briefing doc. If we take a look at the FAQ, what oftentimes it'll do is it'll take high level thought process and be able to provide questions for you and provide general high level ideas of what it thinks are most important. And so if those are matching up with my own high level ideas and my student learning outcomes, then that means that there's a match. If these are providing different things than what I had intended to, it means that there's a mismatch, and it's an opportunity for me to really think about, am I really highlighting the things I'm supposed to, or am I shying away from that? And if I'm shying away from it, cool, there's really an opportunity to further improve and be able to really think in more detail with intention, how can I incorporate those back into the PowerPoint presentation slide deck and incorporating that into the presentation. So that's one thing, is the frequently asked questions. The other thing that I recommend is doing the briefing doc. It'll provide the same exact type of thought process, overall high-level thoughts. So it's a really great way of just double-checking that there's no mismatch. Thanks for sticking around and taking a look at how to build out a rubric as well as evaluating your presentation material. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My name again is Rahul Noria, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.